Normally I just sign posters. This is seeming like quite a lot more serious.
I feel like, yeah.
Get relaxed. Might be here for a little while.
I've had a lot of Red Bull and coffee. Sitting back is not going to work out.
You got to work it out. You've already had a lot of activity today, Will. Come on, man.
Yeah, I need more. It's been good. I'm looking forward to it.
Like flying, hiking, scrambling. You got it all. You packed it all in this morning before noon.
Yeah, and it's really good that there's no like smell-o-vision on your podcast because this is like 4 hours into the day of activity.
They did have to bring in a new outfit for you. So
that's true. Yeah. I got the fresh T-shirt.
So. Oh, you have people for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got people for that. It's in his rider.
Green. Where's my green M&Ms, man?
All right, guys, this has been a long time in the making. We are here at BD headquarters to celebrate, I would say, the best BD tool that we've had. I don't know, Cobra's pretty damn good, so I know Will's going to maybe fight me on that one. And the Cobra was quite good. Yeah, we're going to hear a little roundtable discussion to talk about Black Diamond Hydra tool. And we got DG here to really kind of give us a little history lesson of how did we get to this point. But before we get to that, I do want to know what Will's favorite ice tool is, even as today. Because he keeps giving me a look like, I don't know about that comment.
No, I mean, the Cobra was great, and I clubbed at it for 25 plus years, right? So I can't really argue with that. But the Hydra is the first tool that has actually gotten me off the Cobra for ice climbing.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and it's great, and I'm stoked.
I don't think anybody's climbed on the same tool for 25 years.
No.
which does say something about the Cobra. So
well, there may have been two.
Yeah. There were two generations of the Cobra, so it wasn't entirely exactly the same tool, but you hang the original Cobra up from like the one I won the World Cup on, which is like the Gen 1 Cobra, and all the way through to now. They're not wildly different, and it was just a really, really good tool for ice climbing.
Yeah.
But there's a new one.
There's a new one.
Yeah.
So, and we also got Jackson Marvell here, so sitting in on the podcast.
Oh, yeah. Excited to be here.
He's taken the tool up a couple of notable climbs.
I have.
Yeah, and then DG, why don't you just kind of give us maybe a little introduction, and we'll kick it from there.
Well, my name's Derek Gustafson. I've been at BD for...
That's what DG stands for? No, just kidding.
Turns out. Well, I have a stunt double.
All right, cool.
I used to call you Derek, but I now it's just like everybody calls you DG that I've just gone with it.
I'm not really sure when that happened, but might have been a KP thing. Yeah. We have a lot of nicknames here. But, I've been here for a bit and worked on a lot of product at BD, way back, and more recently kind of took the reins on a big category for BD, which is all the climbing gear. And by taking those reins from our buddy Colin a couple years ago, sort of in a way inherited this project because BD's been working on the new ice tool, and we had worked on ice tools prior to this in between the Cobra and the Hydra. But really, I think what was different about this project was when we realized it was not a 1 year turnaround, like, hey, let's go out, let's draw some sweet pictures, design some stuff, make it, and then send it into the world. We pretty quickly realized that, we kind of to release ourselves from this being a fast project. Anytime you take a piece of gear that's, going into a pretty mature place, ice climbing, while it's quite fresh in all these tools over the past 20 years, look quite a bit different. It's a pretty old game. People have been trying to get up ice for a long time, and we're reaching a point in some of these where, like a carabiner's 3 parts. There's only so much you can do. Now this ice tool game is getting to a point of really detailed refinement. And so when we realized that it was just not like, go to the drawing board, reinvent the wheel, and then, send it up to Canada and make sure it works, it kind of opened the door to just say, hey, we got to step back, take our time, really test this through many winters, many cycles. And again, that's sort of the project that that I came to sort of inherit, or not that I like make anything amazing. I just help the team and make sure that we're all connected and doing the right thing.
Yeah, because I was pretty impressed when I asked Will when was the first time he got his hands on the tool. I think it was, you said 2020?
Yeah, 2020 was the first emails. Like, we're going to redo this. And I think it was supposed to be done like fall of 22. That was the time. That was what you inherited, DG. It's like, this will be done in a couple of weeks here. There's really not much to work out. And then, like, thousands of emails later, we're going to have Jeremy on here in a minute. But I was digging through them before I came down here, and it was a disaster zone of long emails.
How much has it changed since it first set foot in your hands?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll get into that in a minute, but yeah, the idea was like on a 2-year timeline. That was a project that you had, and then now it's been, it wasn't right.
Yeah.
And so it had to be, it was redone, and we were trying a lot of really different new things that we hadn't done. So it was a huge evolution. And
DG, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is a big change to be able to have the amount of time that you did to actually, like, 4 years in the making. I mean, is a long time.
Yeah, I think
that's not normal, is it?
There's a couple of pieces that play into that. One would be, hey, if we're going to start from the ground up, and originally we have a bunch of tools here that if you're able to sort of imagine BD tools through the past 10 years, you would say, hey, there's a piece of the Viper, there's a piece of the old Fusion, there's a piece of the Cobra, and then you would, if you looked at the Hydra, you'd say, well, not a single part looks like any of those old parts. And I think after that first round, it was sort of pretty clear that what we had been doing wasn't necessarily the starting point that we wanted to use. It's more like, hey, what do you do with all that knowledge? Not like, what do you do with all the bolts and stuff? And so as we started after that sort of first round of testing and building, it was like, well, let's start from the ground up and just say, where do we want the weight to be? How do we want the picks to work? How do we want this head to be created, manufactured, all this stuff to go together to give us the performance and versatility that we could like see the future needing. And that was a huge shift. We've had the same, I'm not even sure how long we've done that old style pick configuration where it's one bolt and a groove, but 1840 or something, but like just a little after Will was. So
this was used in the California gold rush by the early miners to excavate the overburden over the soil. But that pick design, that was really good. This was the best like integration. You could loosen and tighten the picks with the other pick, and so that was a really good design for 1995.
Well, the original Black
1990
had a really similar attachment. So it's going well into the early 90s.
Yeah, early 90s. So it's a stainless cast head. Like, this was the system, right?
Yeah.
And we had that for so long, and we needed that because the picks were massive, so you needed a lot of weight behind them to drive them. And obviously this one's been used. Alex Lowe probably used this thing to pound pins,
Yeah.
or maybe
why he was hanging off of one arm.
Used to excavate the overburden of highlight, maybe.
Yeah. This is a highlight one, and then there's like a leash on this thing, and so it's like the history of this basic design with the two bolts with slots in them. Like, I've been with BD for over 25 years, and that has been the design for 25 plus years.
As we started into the new, like the next evolution, it became pretty clear that this cast stainless chunk on the top, which for years this format provided like total bomber construction. We could glue to it, we could cast it. We knew that like format, but it started to become sort of a hitch, like, hey, we can't really evolve how this thing swings and how it feels, and the weight, when the weight is so concentrated into this one critical part. And that's where Jeremy and the squad were like, hey, if we can find a way to hold this stuff all together on top minus this chunk of steel, that can really help. And I think if you look at all the tools, say, well, you've got all these little steps that in our brains today don't seem like that big a deal. You have forged aluminum, you can hydroform aluminum shafts, you can injection mold nylon and rubber over aluminum, like consistently. You can forge a chunk of aluminum for the head. You can cast weights out of like crazy materials. All of those little things are what enables sort of that next step. No one piece probably like unlocks it, but the combination of all of them and having that sort of resource and sort of depth of engineering knowledge at BD has like unlocked quite a thing. And I wouldn't say that it's like exclusive. None of this materials are uniquely like only BD can get the tungsten weights or whatever. It's really more like only BD is, I believe, positioned to put them all together with the testing, with the manufacturing, with the prototyping, with the team to do it inside and out to make something like this come together.
So, Will, kind of maybe give us some history of. I mean, you just picked up the Black Prophet there, which was that the first BD tool when you as a BD athlete that you were on?
The first one was you probably had these too. They were the all rubber shafts.
Yeah, that's the one.
It was like a pound and a half of rubber. Like it was brought in straight from like the Indian rubber trees or something. I forget what it was, but it was, and they were awesome. They were super damp. They climbed all right. And then these came along, the Black Prophets with the carbon shaft, and everybody hated on these. I remember the magazine's like, that glue bond is going to break. And I'm like, that is not going to break. And I remember like the original, I remember like there's a curb out here at BD. I think we should go get a picture of it later. Is it still out there? Somebody do that? Yeah, it is. So there's a curb here that's totally destroyed. And it was a curb test. And you'd take this thing out there and you'd beat on the curb with it. And you could like shatter all the carbon in it until it was like flopping around like a dead fish. And the head would still be attached.
Yeah.
So they did not break, but everybody was down on this. So like, this is not going to work. You guys are like playing with fire and it's bullshit and other impolite words. But it was really, really good. And this thing was amazing for its era. It was heavier than sin, and you could drive like, the picks were so thick. Modern picks are like 2 to 4 millimeters wide. And the picks back then were like, I think they were measured in width in like centimeter increments or something. Yeah, it was like
metric back then.
Yeah, and the idea of this thing was it would last forever, and it has. I still have one of these on my wall. It's my cleaning tool, and I've beaten the shit out of it for cleaning rock roots and ice roots for like a long time. But anyhow, this was a huge leap. And then, not long after that, the first Cobra came out. This is the second gen one, or I can't remember if it's the third one.
Yeah,
but
it's second.
Yeah, second. And it feels so good, actually, in my hand. I've spent so much time on these tools. But this was amazing, too. People are like, wow, it's all radically curved, and it's too curved, and it won't work. Like, now we're starting to get... That was like the story every new tool. Is like, that's not going to work. This thing was great, and definitely a lighter head and lighter hammer, and it was fantastic.
And I feel like that was the biggest... Like, that was a huge jump.
Yeah.
From where we were.
Yeah.
To go to the Cobra.
It was a huge jump in every way.
Yeah.
But the same system, you could use your other pick to take apart the head. It was like, it had some really good benefits, and it was incredibly durable. This thing is so overbuilt.
Yeah. It's the irony of those tools is that we think of carbon fiber as this like lightweight, bicycle racing, race car thing for weight. And really what this tool was built around is the durability and sort of the feel that you could only get in that configuration with carbon. And the head, it's kind of crazy to see it now. The amount of steel around the top of that shaft is like, it's pretty real. And that's probably a direct product of the curb.
Well, it would, and if you could beat on it on the curb like that and it would survive. And I think mine are like almost, they're at least, I'm sure I've climbed 1,000 pitches on mine, and they're still going great. They're just incredibly durable items. And then, like mixed climbing came along, and this tool came out, and it looks kind of antiquated, but for the time it was super radical. It was the first fusion, and people are still using these in the World Cup today, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it has an insanely steep pick angle. I don't know what it's measured in, like, it's more like a claw than a pick, really. But when you hang on this thing, the pick shift is close to 0. And this is a really cool design for its era. And like I said, people are still climbing on it, but it did not climb ice well. It's probably the politest way. But if I'm going to like hang off an edge anywhere in the world, like this is probably still one of the very, very best tools for that. And the heads got a bit lighter and the picks got a bit skinnier, and all of a sudden there's things like teeth on top, and there's 2 handles and places to put your hands. And this was a direct product of the Ice Climbing World Cup. And that's what it was made for, and it was great for that.
Yeah, but if you took it out ice climbing, it really made Water Ice 4 feel like Water Ice 5.
Yeah, or 6.
Or 6.
It was pretty bad. If you could climb water ice on this, you had skills. But it wasn't made for that. And then the cool thing about it is, like, my fingers are still messed up from these tools, like, 15 or 18 years later or whatever. It had this fusion bite, but it was designed. Yeah, dude, it was like a finger jam.
Oh.
It was actually designed so that you could jam it a bit. And my pinkies used to get so big during ice climbing season. They'd be out to like here, and I could like let go of the tool and hang there. Yeah. Again, it was like, and everybody said it was really silly. At that point, mixed climbing, everybody's like, that's stupid. That's not going to last. A bunch of dry toolers out humping, whatever. Anyhow, it was not good. And then things moved along. Things like Hydra forming and the Viper. Was the Fusion or the Viper first? I can't remember.
I think the Fusion.
Yeah.
Those were close to the same time.
Yeah, these are all kind of the same era. This tool incredibly stiff. Like, I'm pretty sure that this thing was rated for like 49 kNs for jacking your car out of the ditch. It would not break. It was incredibly strong, incredibly rigid shaft, and a very good tool for dry tooling. It had a spike on the bottom, so you could still stab yourself in the leg if you wanted, but also remove it.
Before this was the original reactor that had the green molded grip.
Yeah.
It was like an extension of the Fusion, I think. I mean, it looked like the Fusion grip, but that would have been one place where we, made these kind of a jump towards the grip molded over the rubber.
Yeah.
Which, it's a detail, but it kind of makes some of the other pieces possible.
I think that's when industrial design started getting, obviously this design was done by an engineer, right? Like,
yep.
It's pretty ugly.
Is that geometry is the geometry that makes it so you can hang from the lower pommel, grab the upper when it's on a little edge. That's sort of fixed. There's no like magic there in the world of like hanging things off of hooks.
Well,
that's sort of
this tool fixed it, but most of it didn't. It's so bad.
What I'm getting at is, if you look ahead, a lot of tools that have this purpose, those relationships are all really similar. So it's like these evolutions of these pieces and parts after that really, that's the refinement.
Yeah, this was a good one. Chuck Brainerd was the main guy. Remember Chuck?
Yeah, that was like he was just departing.
But he came up with he did a good job on that one back.
If I remember right, there was nothing anywhere close to that tool when it came out.
There were versions. Yeah, there were. I mean, this is the leashless revolution, right? Like, this is when it's all going on. So there's some other tools. The OG ergos were out right around this time.
Were they? Okay.
But they had these really big flanges on it and stuff that made them. Yeah. I mean, everybody got on this for dry tooling and hard mix climbing, and it's like, this is the bomb.
Yeah.
The ergo climbed ice better, but had other issues, and I mean, I don't look as like. Yeah, I got nothing bad to say about that tool either. That was a great tool. So I don't.
It's interesting as you're picking all these up. I just realized that from the start, all of the BD heads have always been glue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been.
Which is.
I'm trying to think of when we started that. When they invented.
I mean,
Black Prophet.
Black Prophet is and it's forever been that way, which is unlike many other companies.
The rubber grip one glued too, because it has some pegs through the.
I think it was pegged too.
Right when we went to that one.
But I mean, the cool thing though is that everybody did diss this. They're like, that's not going to work, and BD's had issues in various departments over the years, but the heads have not been that issue. Right. This has been truck.
It's been cool. Carbon Black Prophet being the first one after the rubber grip. As soon as you try to put a pin through a carbon shaft, and it's a no-go. It doesn't work. It's not strong enough. So by going to carbon, it really made it necessary to glue the parts all together. And then it wasn't that long after that we just started gluing everything together.
Yeah, It was cool. That was that was a really innovative thing. It came out of the carbon bike industry at the time, and everybody's like, oh, those because I think it was Trek was gluing
the lugs onto the tubes.
And everybody's like, oh, that's not going to work, and it worked pretty well.
I remember hearing that, and when you said that, it reminds me of I heard something about Will back in the day, that you went out and purposely broke one of those. And maybe it was maybe it was the Cobra carbon. I don't remember. Did you I mean, you talked about the curb story. Was that you that did that?
Well,
At
I
least
tried.
That's a long time ago for me, but I just remember something about somebody saying, "Oh yeah, Will went out and finally broke it," but it wasn't actually climbing.
No, I mean, I was suspicious, especially this new Cobra with the shape. And so like I went out and beat on it for like 6 months and it still held together.
Huh.
And then it became like destructive testing. I like took my crampon and jumped up and down really hard on it and broke the outside, that it still wouldn't break. And then I like smashed it up on a curb somewhere. And then I think the final thing that did it in is I drilled it with a hand drill. And eventually I got it down to like half its weight and it was still strong. And
That's crazy.
Finally I broke it after like, I think I tried to like, like I said, dig my truck out or something with it, but it was so ridiculously strong. And it was strong as a unit too. Like the handle didn't come off, this is glued in as well. So it's just, incredibly strong. I've used Cobras and, you're not supposed to do this, but we do creative things alpine climbing. I've used this as parts of anchors and like, I wouldn't hang like I don't tell anybody, but that's one of the big advantages to this system is that it's actually structural here. Things didn't fall apart. But, moving right along, we could do like an hour on this. And then there's, if you can hear that, there's a lot of tools down there.
Will's happy place over here. He's got at least 20 sets of tools below. Not sets, actually, but yeah.
Oh, and then the fuel, the kind of final version of this, and it came in a version like this with the hammer and a version without it, and it climbed well, but it was incredibly stiff. And the picks were still fairly large in width. And this was kind of the last one of the old technology. It was like, at some point it became clear that to go forward, we had to do things differently. And, when you've got 25 years of investment and know-how sunk into this basic system, it's pretty hard to change. It's like a marriage for 25 years. It's like, I'm not going out with you anymore. And it's like, what do you mean? It's like a big deal. It's not something you do lightly, actually. There was a lot of discussion internally at BD.
There's just the fact that we've had such a good track record with this being bomber.
Yeah.
And, we often have this internal conversation around, we're testing to this degree. We do these lab tests and, it's like either cycle count or strength or whatever. And the counterpoint, I think the product team's relationship with the quality team is really healthy here, where we say, hey, you quality squad, and this is a fully different department, and they test it and they break it and they say, it didn't pass. And often it's a conversation, hey, like, do we really need to pass that test with this tool? Either it's a conversation or it's a yes or no. And it's our quality department really helps us by being almost like a third party. They're kind of like sitting outside. They go, hey, here's the requirement we've identified for this particular construction or assembly or whatever. And it becomes a bit pass fail. And it's really a great way to check your own assumptions and your ego. And it's like, oh, I think we could do it this way. And I'm looking at this obviously suspect carbon tool on the table here that was like, we built it, we climbed in it, it was amazing. It's like hopelessly weak. I mean, because you can do a lot of climbing on something that isn't that strong, but it only has to not work once to be a real problem. And so back to this like stainless steel head, the bomber construction, like moving away from those known quantities that have just history behind them. We have so many miles on some assembly, and when you're getting into ice climb, it's all these exceptions like, oh, but then this happened and it broke and that was a problem. It's really tough to figure out what's that condition going to be and design around it. Whereas the old tool, it's like, it's been out for 25 years. It's probably seen most of those instances. It's not going to break. So yeah, you're right. Taking a new road is kind of tough when it comes to something like this that's subtle and people use it wrong. And
I mean, Will got in fights with people about it. So He didn't talk to KP for 6 months. So.
Which is hard to do.
Yeah, you're a bad man when KP won't talk to you for 6 months. Just for those who don't know, KP was the last head of climbing, and I really wanted to go in a different direction. And again, it is like a marriage. Like there is a lot going on there, and so there was resistance and hurt feelings.
Which is hard
That's
to
a
do
very
among
polite way to put
Canadians.
it. Yeah.
Well, you get enough Red Bull in me, I'm not very Canadian anymore. So anyhow.
And for you, Will, I mean, because you like, I mean, you've always been pretty vocal about, the tools and things like that. So, I mean, obviously it led to the KP conversation, but like, I think it just says something too, a little bit about maybe how BD was really entrenched in this design that was there. So like, I'm curious, like, DG, like, what was it that like finally like, what was it that finally took us away from it?
Well, I think we also have this great team of designers and engineers here that a little bit like the QA squad, where they have a pretty objective way of approaching problems. Like, hey, here's the conditions, and myself or KP or Will or anybody that's sort of informing that decision probably has some bias, some opinion, some history that's probably well-founded. But when you take just a pure sort of engineering approach to a problem like weight, position, or balance, or pick angle, or any of these details, you get a whole new and very objective sort of way to tackle it. And if you layer on, hey, the world is changing, and much like when we went from leashes to leashless, that's a real release. You're like, oh, like now, like nobody wants the leash on there, so that's a different set of conditions. Or more and more people are experiencing ice climbing at Ouray or Bozeman, and that's like vertical, awesome, fun ice. That's a great way to start. Tools now don't do every single thing. You're not walking up Rainier with the same tool that you climb Bridal Veil with. So those sort of changes in the world of today that are actually different.
I hope not, man. I really hope not.
It's easier one way than the other. But things like, if you look at the old Cobra and where that thing was really strong, is people take that all kind of Alaska Himalayan adventures, and when you say, hey, the world has the Cobra or the Viper and the new Hydra, you got this choice. It sort of liberates you to design something differently. Weight's the same way. Like, hey, we've built this thing in this way for so long, and we found a new way to make it just as strong, and it's lighter, and it is in line with what we're hearing from the field, from folks like Will and Jackson. Then you make that change. I like to think it's objective, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to decide.
Yeah.
And that was you.
No, that wasn't me. I think this one was collectively like, hey, every indication from quality, engineering, athlete input, climber input just says, hey, it's time to change. And we're not that fast to change things sometimes, but I'd like to think we have open ears. At least one.
I think that's a great point to maybe a spot to transition into, kind of talk with the design and QA guys. Unless Will's anything history wise. I mean, you pretty much went through it there. You didn't pick up a reactor, but
no, I don't. No.
Yeah, I know you're not going to. So
no, the reactor is well loved by those who love it.
I don't know. There's some other people that really like the fuel too. So
I do like the fuel. I climbed Niagara Falls on that tool. I mean, every one of these tools I could go through it. There's like Norway was all, Norway, big roots in Norway era. That was all Cobras, and like the green fusion went up Niagara Falls. There's like histories and stories with all these, but that'd take a long time. So yeah, I think we're at a good point. And the other thing I'd like to say is, in the Hydra, there is actually a lot in the Hydra that is in these tools. And a lot of people look at it and go, "Oh, you just carbon copied, tool A, B, C, whatever horse they're getting on." But it doesn't work that way, actually.
No.
There's a lot in the lineage that goes forward. And I think that's cool. There's a lot of there's a lot going on in the new Hydra that is cool.
Yeah. Well, let's get the design and QA guys on. So we were just kind of like talking a little design. Jeremy, I guess you're going to be kind of more on our design team here, huh?
Yep.
So can it maybe take us from the moment right before Will gets the first prototypes in his hands? Like, how did we get to that point?
Okay. Well, first off, maybe I'll give a little introduction
yes,
about
absolutely.
myself. I'm Jeremy Stack. I'm a mechanical engineer at Black Diamond. I've worked here for 13 years. And when I came into this project, I had never ice climbed. So I know typically at Black Diamond, we kind of pride ourselves as being users of the equipment. And in all the times I've worked here, I worked on cams and belay devices, things that are rock climbing related. I know that. I live that. I do that all the time. But whenever I was asked to design a new ice tool, I didn't even know where to begin, to be honest. So I think it actually helped me to design this because I got to approach this from a beginner's mindset, and I had to solicit the help from people like you all. And very quickly I realized, going out and ice climbing and observing people and hearing all this feedback, everybody tells you something different. Will's got his favorite tool. Aaron, you have your favorite tool. Jackson's got his favorite tool. And they all explain why they like what they like. And none of it from an engineering stance makes any sense. And even as you all try to explain it, I'm like trying to convert this into some kind of math, well, that doesn't really make any sense. So I decided to just turn everybody into essentially a guinea pig. I figured there had to be something to, the balance of the tool. Everybody always talks about this tool just has this nice balance, this swing. When you make a stick, you could tell it's a good stick.
Oh yeah.
And early on, I didn't even know what that meant. What a good stick even felt like. Quickly I learned it's oh yeah, that's when it's good. So we initially just began taking some tools that we already had at Black Diamond, and I pretty much started drilling holes in the picks and the shafts, and in fact we have one right here. So this is our current inline Viper, and I modified it heavily. As you can see, I cut the shaft off, I put a little extender to make it a little bit longer, I put a little offset grip on it. I tried to make this all match up to like a sketch in CAD. It was okay, all right, I think you need to define where the pick point is, where your first position is, that's where your pinky would be there, and where your second position is, which would be for matching or choking up, and trying to figure out how all those things relate. So I took this tool, and as you can see, there's a bunch of brass washers and screws, and it's not pretty. But we went out, and I don't even know how many people have tried this thing in all the different configurations, but I knew if you put 5 washers in the third hole and 2 washers in the second hole, I know where that center of mass is. Mm-hmm. And we would have people basically go up a pitch of water ice, and then I'd switch things around again, go up again. Better 1, better 2, the eye doctor kind of thing. And we just kind of did that over and over with a variety of people. And what's crazy is everybody gravitated towards this certain position. I mean, within a really narrow margin.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
It's crazy. So I figured that's probably a good place to begin. If everybody agrees on that, at least if I maintain that, people will probably like the tool.
And so the 3 bolts that are in there, that are you talking when you say the position everybody was into is that configuration when you were throwing this, as far as the weight wise, or
this particular one I'm really not sure.
Okay. But it was utilizing basically the same type of thing.
Same idea. And what I'm kind of looking at is we'll just say the center of mass of the head region relative to the swing position, we'll say, of your pinky as the whole tool pivots. There's a relationship there that's really important.
Yeah. Okay. And so, Will, did you get your hands on this whole?
Yeah, and I've got ones that have look even grosser than that, with great big machine bolts jammed through them and stuff. Because I was also tried to do this, and I've got the scale and calipers, and I'd send you emails that you would respond politely to.
Dude, Will's feedback, it's always good.
Well, that's so
because he's passionate.
Did you see how he did that again?
Yeah, that was very
good.
Well
yeah, that was really well done.
Very well done. I mean, he is standing here right in front of you, Will. So,
yeah, I know. Yeah, well, it's like the internet rule. But no, that one, I don't know if I tried that one. I tried various versions of different things, and then you guys, to your credit, you came up to Canada, with a whole whack of different.
Wait, what? You actually went and tried it?
Yeah, well, they come up, and I teach a lot of ice climbing. I guide and I teach, and I've done that for 30 years. And so I'd be like, okay, how does this wood work, and how if you swing it this way? And yeah, it was very, very interactive early on in the process. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So you've got the mathematical formula for ice tool swinging weight perfection.
Yeah, so that was the whole, like, the goal of this is you're figuring out the balance of the tool.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
So then the next step was basically like, obviously this is not a product. So we had to try to turn that into something that people actually might want to use. And we still have to think about grip, comfort, ergonomics, like how long the tool is. And then, all the stuff that goes into designing a good pick and what the pick is for, whether it's for mixed climbing, water ice climbing, just the alpine, or pure dry. Those are all way different picks. So trying to figure out that is tricky too. So basically where we started though is we knew where we wanted the center of mass, and we made the decision to put our front bolt right on that spot. So like that seems like a logical place to put it. And then it would allow us to essentially make head weights or head spacers that you could stack up on that same position and change the weight of the head or the mass of the head, but not actually change how it swings or the balance.
Okay.
So yeah.
And so whose idea was that to be able to change that balance in the head?
I don't know. Probably we all kind of work together. I mean, like
Yeah.
Sean and I, and we have industrial designers and DGs in the team. I mean, there's so many people involved. Like it's collaborative.
Yeah, because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Will, but that's putting the weight in the head. That's the first. I mean, the Hydra's the first tool to do that. Petzl was in the pick. I don't know. I'm trying to think if
there's been different versions of it where people played with the weight, but I actually wasn't a fan of that originally.
I know. I had to try to convince you.
Yeah, it took a while. I was like, because it went back and forth. It has to do with a bunch of other dynamics, but you do have to synthesize all this information that comes into you into something coherent.
Yeah,
and it's complicated, and it pains me to admit this, but you were right.
All right. All right. Well, that's a good start.
Yeah.
Let's keep going with that. So, all right. So that is a big change. Then, obviously, the weights in the head and it is surprising how much it makes a difference in that tool. It's a very different tool from light, medium to heavy. So, okay.
Yeah, and that also came from feedback too. Because this is something I realized, like ice climbing, I had to rely on a lot of the experts that we have in-house. I mean, we have some guys that are amazing ice climbers. I'm certainly not one of them, but they're like, this thing needs to climb in like cold, brittle, hard ice, stuff that's dinner platey. So like almost all of my ice climbing experiences have kind of sucked because we kind of went out on the days when probably the recreational person doesn't want to go climbing because it's just fucking cold. But we're going out looking for that.
You went to Canada, so you got to go out. Will's
actually,
not sitting around
Canada
the house,
was the first time that I actually would say that I had enjoyable days of ice climbing. I was like, okay, I get why people do this. But that's like 2 years into the project.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
But we were going out for those conditions because that's the only way to really tell if the thing penetrates ice well. I mean, if it's plastic, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So you need that kind of tough conditions. And a lot of times that condition changes throughout the day. So like you get there early in the morning on something that's fresh, no one's climbed on it. You kind of need to do these A-B comparisons and do them pretty quickly before you beat up the ice. So it's a lot of that, just cold stuff. So that's kind of where we are. And that's with the head weight thing, that's where we started to learn that when it's really cold, people tended to gravitate more towards, they like the heavy head, and then they're like, yeah, it takes less energy to swing. Yep. But whenever it's, we'll say, getting warmer or starting to get picked out, people tended to not like the heavy head because they're like, well, it just feels like it's too heavy for what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to be able to almost customize for the day if
absolutely.
you can. Or even make the change on the fly.
Which I thought was kind of a gimmick, but it turns out it's not. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a really important thing to say because you can go to Uray and you can test ice tools, and you could use steak knives there. Most days it's like, it's above freezing, and there's these big dog dishes, and you could hook your way up with like Fisher-Price ice tools or whatever the modern equivalent is, and steak knives and stuff. It doesn't give you a real sense of what works for actual ice climbing across a broad set of conditions. Yet at the same time, as a company, that's where people make decisions about buying ice tools, which is really frustrating if you're in Canada and you get this thing and it's like, there's not enough weight in it to swing. So yeah, that adjustability is actually really, really important. And I'm glad you picked up on that early.
Yeah, it's like taking a off-road vehicle and testing it on the highway. And this is good. Like Uray is not the place.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and Uray
is great. Not to diss Uray, but we love it. But
it's Disneyland for ice climbers. I mean, it's great for getting traffic and everything. But if you're testing a tool for going up to Canada or Cody or.
Well, I remember being at
mountains.
Uray, and we're like getting in behind the pillars back in these weird places, and like what are people looking up like? What are they doing down there?
Yeah, climbing on the trash ice.
breaking it.
We'd be like in some corner beating on things, and people are like, "What are you doing?" But that's what we needed to do.
Yeah.
And it was cool.
Okay, so so really, I mean, it's cool that you really kind of wiped the slate clean of where you were starting with this tool.
Yeah, totally.
And the focus was balance, which at the end of the day is the most important piece in the tool, is that balance, that swing weight. So you started there, and then do you remember when it was that you actually first sat down to even work on this project?
I think it was probably November or December of 2019.
Okay, that lines up. And then Will got 20 and
Yeah.
2020. Right?
Our first emails back and forth were in 2020, like in relatively early in 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I
Wow.
dug them out.
Yeah, in fact, when we were talking before sitting down here, this particular prototype with all the washers and everything like that, I remember it was probably like late March or something
Yeah.
in 2020 that we were up in Highlight, like testing stuff, and we had heard like rumors of like, oh man, they're starting to shut down schools, or there's this COVID thing.
Yeah.
And there's like, and I'm like, they're never going to close everything down. We're like, we're fine, like, and then sure as shit, like,
Yeah.
things changed a lot.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so start at the head, and then at so when you actually had a prototype, did you work top to bottom at that point? Had you figured out the handle yet, and
Yeah.
curve and everything else? Like, how does that bake into this?
Yeah, it was basically once we had that layout that we wanted, we realized that you could sort of kind of tune your ice tool depending on what you're trying to do with it. If you wanted to make like a comp specific one, we knew the recipe then. If you wanted to make it more of a straighter shaft for maybe more alpine-y stuff, like we kind of figured out the recipe
Yeah.
for it. Or if we wanted this to be like your general all around like hard technical ice kind of climbing thing, we kind of knew the recipe for that too. So we decided, for the Hydra, that was what we were shooting for. So we started to look towards, the head seemed pretty good. We started looking at the shaft in terms of like how much bend you put on there, and how much offset you want to put in your second position, and just general shape of the grips and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which
And a big change is the Hydra's the first time going from a steel head to aluminum,
yes,
right? And then Will, that tied in your why was it that you were beating the drum of going to aluminum heads?
I wasn't sure we needed to go to an aluminum head, but we needed to change that weight distribution.
Okay.
And the only way to really change that was to go to a lighter head, to move that weight forward, as I understood it.
yeah,
And that needed to happen. But again, it's like 25 years or 25 plus years on steel heads. That's a big ask. People, but you somehow got, those meetings must have been
I
interesting.
lucked out because I think nearly every designer before me also suggested that they wanted to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think it was just time.
Timing's everything.
Yeah. And it requires you to redesign all of your ice tools.
Yeah.
Because now
Yeah.
you're changing the platform.
Yeah.
So it becomes more than just one project.
I think for me also, it's like over the years, we used to need really heavy heads because we had these huge fat picks. And there's like not only a relationship about how, like where the weight is in the head, but just how much is required to drive the pick.
Yeah.
And as picks got thinner, when you still had really heavy heads, then you tended to just overdrive them. And so there's so many factors. Like Jeremy makes it sound really simple, but I know from the emails and working on this endlessly that it's just, there's so many variables that go together in how an ice tool swings. And it's just, endlessly complicated.
Yeah, I think that the changing of the picks is so huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
Like to just even go out and swing an old, even to put that old pick on the Hydra would be a massive difference. Like it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, there's so much thinner, and like we figured out it wasn't just the thinness, but it was the displacement.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like we thought it was initially just thinness. It's like the thinner they got, the better. It's like, I don't know, how much water does it displace?
Yeah.
Like that's actually a better measure of how well it's going to penetrate.
Yeah.
And just I learned a lot over that time.
You were saying that from the get-go about the displacement, and always pushing to make it displace less, be thinner and all that. And I had to laugh. It was only like maybe 6 months ago, I think on KP's Instagram, I saw a picture of you with a tool and you had calipers up to a set of picks. I'm like, God damn, Will's got those calipers everywhere. It was like summertime in Vegas or something.
Pocket calipers.
I saw KP and he's like, just don't get the calipers. I think I like gave you guys PTSD because I'd send back pictures of like the sizes and the diameters. And, and then I had this postal scale where I'd measure like the head weight versus the handle weight and send that back. And anyhow, you guys
kept us honest.
Well, yeah, and and you were also doing your own things and getting things right too. So it was obviously got things right.
Yeah. All right. So take us down. So you were kind of talking about the design of the shaft and then working down to the handle there.
Yeah. So shaft. I mean, most of that was like I think we knew we wanted to do a hydroform shaft, aluminum. I'm probably not going to get into it, but we definitely went down the carbon route as well.
Yep.
I think DG kind of hit on that a little bit as to there's some challenges with doing that in terms of durability and weight and stuff, especially with what we know now about making hydroformed shafts. We're good at it now.
Yeah.
Really that was just coming down with the bend and the shape. The whole COVID thing kind of reminded me, early on, one of the requirements we said was we wanted to make it so you could bite the shaft. Like you'd look at shafts like the Cobra, it makes it tough to do like a mouth match.
Yeah.
We're making 3D prints of these shafts, and it's like middle of 2020, and we're like passing this thing around the office with like alcohol and like wiping the shaft down, and like somebody else bites it, and then you wipe it down, and the next person bites it. It felt like for sure somebody was gonna get sick. It was that time whenever you're like pretty afraid, or like lots of people were afraid, you didn't know what it was.
Nice.
So we figured out the shaft, and then it really came down to the grip position and grip shape. I would say is the thing that probably took us almost the longest. In fact, we went through some tooling that we ended up not using for grips, and we learned that up in Canada. It felt really good. It was the perfect grip shape if you were dry tooling. It had the right shape for matching, but there was just something not right for controlling it for penetrating ice, especially when it was, hard, brittle ice.
Yeah.
And we kind of went back to the drawing board and Sean, I don't know if you can remember how many iterations of grips we did.
There's a box that weighs probably 50 pounds there of resin.
Yeah.
I remember when Will and I, it was like there was an athlete meeting or whatever. It was when I first came to BD, and Will's like, "You got to come here. We got a meeting." And I was like, I had never thought about the handle of an ice tool so much in my entire life, but it made sense.
I remember when you brought these up to Canada, and you were justifiably pretty proud of them. And then we went out and swung them, and I was like, and you didn't look real psyched.
Damn it.
Yeah, but it was round, and it was quite ovalized, and we thought that was going to be enough. But it did, whenever you hit the ice, it tended to rotate.
Yeah.
And that tooling was done.
Oh,
which is, a not inconsiderable amount of money, as I understand it. And here's your, athlete team. You guys did look psyched. But to your credit, and that's why the original, Cobra and Black Prophet, they have these indentations on the sides so that you can guide them. And the front is narrower than the back. It's kind of a trapezoid shape. And that is one of the things that carries over directly to the new Hydra, is it has that same shape. Like there's some things that just do work really well. Mm-hmm. So that was cool. I respected that a lot when you were like, okay, it's not fall 23 anymore. That did bump it back a year.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because that must have been the meeting I was at. Because I think, because it was early. Because you had just gotten back. You guys had that trip, and I think they were presenting to you 4 different handles to check out.
That was the eye doctor experience. Is A better or B better?
Yeah.
C better or D?
Unfortunately, that was summertime,
Yeah.
so then you can't really tell anything in the conference room.
Yeah.
We're trying to guess.
But I think it's just it just says a lot of how much went into this tool. It wasn't. Just the amount of re-engineering that that a lot of companies, I think it would have been hard, especially when you go to up to Will in Canada, you're like, hey, we already got this thing done, man. This thing costs a lot of money. We're just have to go with it. It was like, no, let's all right, take a step back and recalibrate and move forward. And I think that's pretty cool, which is, good things come to those who wait, right, Will?
They do, and to Jeremy's credit and the design team's credit, it would have been very easy to go, you know, that you're a freak. You know, we're gonna write this off.
Suck it up, Will.
Suck it up, because I've done that, but I think this is in 25 or 30 years of doing this with various companies, that is the closest I've worked with a group of designers. Like, for real, you came up and you got involved, and then you actually listened, and that is that's actually a really rare thing. And you were up there, and we could stand there in Hafner Canyon and work on it together, and it was awesome.
Yeah, it was
that
cool.
This was, and you would get it. You'd be like, oh yeah, it goes in better, or okay, we do have an issue here, and we're going to like toss away however many thousands of dollars worth of tooling to make it right, and delay it another year. And Gadd sucks, but we'll move on.
Well, I mean, your opinion was not the only one, as well.
So that was entirely my fault.
Yeah,
Okay,
not
good.
entirely your fault. I think we all realized you kind of
Don't
verbalized.
tell Will that.
You verbalizing what
Give
we
him
were
a little
all
weight on his shoulder.
starting to think.
No, but it was a really cool thing to be part of, and to see those iterations. And I'd get these boxes in the mail, and something like this would pop out, and it'd be like, okay, here's the new version of it. And it was always so exciting to get that. They'd swig it and then take it out, and it always said, do not climb on this, which we'd immediately ignore and go out and go climbing on it. And then, like, this is, I think, 3D printed or gel molded. 3D or
It's
gel?
3D printed.
Yeah, so 3D printed. It's the same stuff they make, like the hamster boxes out of or whatever on TV when they're 3D printing, and it would promptly fall apart. But we could figure out how it swung. And then, I've got a box not quite that big, but pretty substantial, of all these grips and configurations and so on that you guys sent me. And that was your department, I guess.
No.
No. All right.
Shipping's elsewhere.
But I was always so psyched to get them, and then I'd break them, and I'd have to send a picture. But I broke it again, and but to your credit, you would fix them and send us more, and we'd go to RAF and to Mulkey and everybody, and we'd try them, and it was just a really cool thing to be part of, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's one thing you hear a lot from athletes is they never feel involved. Like, the product comes and then here it is, and you're like, whereas this, I mean, everybody's had their hands on them. They were tested for a long time.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
4 years of like emails, and like I said earlier, I went through the email list before I came here, and it was just I could scroll for like a very long time. But there'd be like from 2020 all the way through the final sales samples in 2023. Yeah. There's just This was a very involved project.
I remember my wife, when I got the first set, and it had do not climb on.
Yeah.
And I'd been climbing on for a couple months, and she like grabbed me. She's like, "What? Like, why are you climbing on these?" They specifically say do not climb on them. Why? And I'm like, "Oh, don't worry about that." Yeah, which takes us right into QA. So
that was my department.
because you put the sticker on, right?
Yeah.
So like obviously this stuff comes from Jeremy. It's like kind of designed at this point. Well, you actually are testing any designs that are being shipped to the athletes or whatever to try are going to go through the QA lab, right?
Yeah, our full gamut of like fatigue testing. Everything, of course, has to meet the European norm standards that are laid out to sell in Europe. Component by component, and then assembly level, and then kind of making the decisions. To Derek's point earlier, we're pretty ingrained in a lot of our old standards, and if you're going to push the limit, there's like a lot of back and forth with the design guys that are saying like, do we need to make this standard? Do we need to meet that? And it's kind of a odd position to find yourself in, because you are that expert, and it's kind of a scary position to like dial back a standard or like stand up to a design team at times to like enforce the need for that. I remember, we can come to that later.
No,
it's just wild. I mean, I handed Jackson the tools that he took on his trip last year
to Janu. Yeah.
To Janu, and it was like one of the most. It was a weird moment in my life, just knowing the position he was going to put himself in with those tools, and saying, I was the guy signing off, saying, "Here you go, these are good to go." It's kind of funny.
I can't say it was much appreciated though. It was like way stoked to have those on Janu compared to a set of fuels.
Yeah, I could imagine. So take us through, like, obviously that you got the design team. Like, are you brought in, like, as Jeremy's doing the design stuff? What point is like the testing of these things come in? Is it once like the design is done, they send it to you, then you're testing. Like, how does that take me through that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, just based on like the way we cut tooling or the way, we're working with a tool that has a forged head, hydroformed shaft, overmolded grip, cutting tools for all these components. That the lead times are all different.
Okay.
So a lot of times, we'd get a tool with like a reactor extrusion and say some adapter to modify it to a new forged aluminum head. And you do component level testing, I guess, along the way. So it was very difficult. It's kind of hard to say like where exactly I came into play. It was all along the
What's
the
one
path.
of what's like the standard thing you first test?
I would say working down the list of CE standards, there's like, we're talking about a brand new thinner pick to meet the CE standard for both permanent deformation and like a torsional placement, and also what is the other CE requirement? Like I should know this right offhand.
I mean, you have YY, XX.
YY, XX, like component level things. But developing a new pick to meet the EN standard is quite easy, but like quantifying what is acceptable in a modern mixed era.
Is that like the torque, like when you're torquing into the crack and it doesn't bend or break? Is that
exactly. Imagine putting this in a vise and cranking sideways on it.
Okay.
Like
Is it a single or is it continue to do it? Like is it?
That is a single permanent deformation test. Yeah.
So instead of sending it to Will and telling him to go torque it, you're able to torque it here first.
Torque it here first with some instrumentations, and then go up to one of the canyons and like kind of try to equate that to real world use.
Okay. And then what other things kind of are standard kind of testing before this thing goes to Jackson and up Janu?
Yeah. Like end-to-end testing. We have end-to-end tests that might not be prevalent in other manufacturers just because we do these are 100% proofed in the factory because they're glued.
And that end-to-end is like if it's hanging on something, you're pulling down on it. Or is it from
like
there?
Through the carabiner hole and then
the handle.
through the pommel or through the spike even.
What's the standard that it has to pass for that?
All our tools undergo a 1,500 pound proof, so we can't have any like permanent deformation after that.
Is that a drop? Is it like something dropping onto it, or is it like just a
pull in an instron?
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, you also tested them pretty heavily. Like, you've got the data on, for example, like you can, this is not designed obviously to be an anchor, and you should not use it that way ever, full stop. But it is actually like you've tested that, and it's like, I don't know, 700-800 pounds or something. Or higher, 1,200.
Higher over the pommel. Like, if you were going to take a break on a tool, we don't.
Yeah, don't do that. It's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
But it'll break somewhere around 1,200 pounds.
Yeah, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And if I don't want to get into like the pros and cons of this tool too much, but like that is actually a huge pro to me.
It's substantial.
Because we do end up using our tools. Like when I'm bolting on lead on new mixed roots, I'm hooked off of here, or putting in gear. Or sometimes you get down to that's what your rack is at that point.
Right.
And I don't want to leave a new Hydra as the wrap anchor, but it's like, that's actually strong because of the way this thing's built. And that goes back to, the internals of this are not dissimilar than the fuel in some ways. They're pretty similar, and it's really, really strong.
Pretty similar, yeah.
And it's just cool to see your data on that. That was really inspirational to me.
Yeah, all the pommel configurations are quite strong.
Yeah, don't use them that way,
Don't.
but they are actually.
But probably.
And so is the upper pommel and the lower pommel but is the same?
The upper pommel's quite a bit stronger.
Oh, really?
I think, it'll shear the aluminum under the mold around 2,000 pounds.
Oh, wow.
2,200 pounds even.
And then through the actual hand grip, through the hole there, what was that?
4,000
4,000
with a sling failure.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's just like,
I mean, it's truck.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
do it.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't. This is a bad idea. Don't do that.
Don't do
yeah.
that.
Yeah. But they're all like key thing. Like, as anybody knows, if you're in the alpine, I mean,
You're doing what you do.
you do what you do. I mean, I'm sure Jackson's got more than his fair share of stories.
I might have tied off a few protos while we were working on them.
Just a couple of tests out there. Yeah. So, all right. So, any other like key things, like testing wise that you got checking out here?
One of the big things we did, there was a major focus on, a lot of people might recognize or know a story of a friend with a reactor where the pommel broke.
Oh yeah.
So lots of cold impact
I'll
testing.
say there's a lot of broken pommels out there from other companies. So
That's true also,
Yeah.
but I mean, admittedly,
We like to do better, though.
we
Yes.
do. And this does better than anything out there. I can say that.
yeah, it seems quite structurally sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, which it kind of like takes you. I mean, like we were talking earlier about how you could beat the crap out of the Cobra or whatever. I mean, it's nice to kind of like still have that in line of like a tool that you can go out and beat the crap out of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we want to get into it, but there's a lot. People tend to look at this and go, it's really different than the Cobra or the Fuel, and it is really different, but there's some huge similarities and common ground in there that are kind of cool, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like that strength is one of them.
yeah. I mean, it's quite sound. What are some of the key things that you think stand out? Will?
Well, just that, I mean, with, for example, the Fuel, the last Fuel, like this is actually a structural handle, and it doesn't, like the little end piece doesn't just flap up and down here with a little screw through it or a little bolt through it.
Yeah.
This is bolted in straight through the whole rig here. So it is strong. Like when I'm hanging on it one-handed or whatever, I'm not relying on just this little bit of friction turn here. Like that is as strong as this, in my view. Mm-hmm. It's got a piece of aluminum and a grade 5 bolt.
Yeah, it's an M5.
Yeah, well, it's an M5, but isn't it also
Grade 12.
the grade 12 bolt? Like that's a hell of a good bolt that's going into there. So that's, that matters to me when I'm hanging one-armed way out there in space, man. It's like I'm not like, oh, I got the little plastic thing that might or might not hold. It's like
I can feel it bending.
yeah, this is exciting, and so like that's really, really truck. And then just having the spike that comes on and off, so you can if you want to get all alpine on. Did you guys take the spikes up, Janu? I just want to know.
On these?
Yeah.
We did take them up, yeah.
Okay, so Janu, this spike works on Janu. Janu tested here, so you got that. Mainly, I just stabbed myself in the leg with it, so I take it off right away. But you can do that. And then the shape of the handle is again designed so that it swings well, and it's just really strong. All these things are directly coming off the Fuel. The internals of this are not radically different than the Fuel internals, I would think. Is that correct? Or
It's a different construction for sure.
I mean, it's new and better.
Yeah, totally.
But it's a bolt into a piece of aluminum.
Yeah, that part of it, the lower pommel attaches. Essentially, we adopted the Fuel. The shape's a little bit different, but it's pretty close to the same.
I mean, another big advantage of that is the actual shape stays the same. As you put more spacers into here, this shape stays the same. You don't just put the little flap down, right? That changes the actual shape of this a lot. Whereas on the Hydras, it's the same. Your geometry changes micro as it gets a bit longer. But if you've got really big hands, it all works.
All right, so like back to the kind of like the QA piece here. Then like anything else like kind of really stands out to you from a QA standpoint and testing? Like anything cool that you actually put this thing through?
Man, I spent a lot of hours in the freezer, like at -20 with a park on, smashing these into blocks of concrete.
Into blocks of concrete.
Yeah.
All right.
To validate our, ads casting.
And that's to ensure like that the head doesn't really, I guess essentially like nothing's loosening up.
Yeah, and that like one of the big deals about this head weight and its location is it's like a super heavy piece of metal, which makes it super brittle potentially, and it's like what is holding tension on your pick. So one of the big concerns was like if that head weight cracks and suddenly you lose like 2.5 millimeters of the space underneath the bolt,
I see.
you're gonna have a rattly pick.
Yeah.
En route.
That could suck.
En route. Yeah. So there was a lot of testing that went into just like developing this material and the geometry to avoid that scenario.
I think early on in like 21, when I got my first set of protos, I did break some of those titanium headweights on the Infinite Spur, which was one of the cool things to see refined to Johnny last year. Is like when like side smashing these tools, like it lasted the whole season leading in, and then the whole climb leading out.
Yeah. There was a test we did. We kind of initially they were terrible. They would just shatter. They'd
Really?
explode. Yeah. So we started with like a test that I kind of based on a extended column test where there was little wrist taps to shoulder, to an elbow, and then to
It's like the
shoulder.
avalanche one. It's like a tap, tap.
That's really what we did.
Hard motor.
And eventually, you know, we got to where this thing will take 100 smashes from the shoulder, quite hard on a vise at temperature. And, you know, we recommend not doing it, but I've driven many pitons with that head weight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think Jackson has as well, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it. I mean,
Yeah.
because it's what holds your pick on.
Yeah. It's kind of, I mean, it is kind of an important part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes you got to like step back and, you know,
Yeah.
smashing on a vise is how real is this? But when you can, you know, correlate smashing on a vise to smacking the end of a
Yeah.
sharp piton, that's
Yeah.
a big deal.
Absolutely. Well, it's really cool to see all the amount of testing that's going into these things before they hit the athlete's hand, but also before they're actually going to hit the public hand. And I mean, Will's obviously been climbing on them for quite a while, and as well as you, Jackson. But Will, like, what you finally have the tool you've been dreaming about since the Cobra. I think that's probably realistic to say that. Like, how do you feel about this tool?
Well, there's all the engineering details in the Q&A and you know the measurements of visualizing the weight in space and how that lines up, and then there's actually using it. And that's what's been really cool is the generations have gotten better and better and better. And you know, I test every tool out there because as a guide and teaching at festivals, everybody shows up with tools. And so I know how pretty much every tool on the market works, broadly speaking. And it's with great pleasure that lining up all those tools, this is the one I want to take. And I love being at festivals or other places where I've got all the tools and somebody like tries them all and then comes back and grabs these. Because it's been a while since that's happened.
Yeah.
And I love that fact. You know, and I've climbed everything from, you know, big 1,500 foot new lines in Canada that I can't talk about, you know. It's cool. To like new ice in South Africa on cool routes there, to like hard M routes. I've climbed everything on these tools, and I am stoked. And it is the first tool that has retired the Cobra. I didn't climb my Cobras once last year.
Wow.
For the first time in like 20 some years. So this is how
That's saying something.
it is, you know. It's kind of
Yeah.
I felt like I was like, you know, stepping outside the bounds of the relationship. I'd go out with the Hydras. the Cobras would be looking at me on the wall like, hey, you know, like, is that anyhow? You start to feel that way. And
Oh,
it
yeah.
was, but yeah, I'm really psyched on it. They just climb really, really well. And I like the fact that I can give them to novices at a festival or when I'm guiding, and they climb well for the novices too.
Yeah.
And
I think that's like one of the most amazing things is like the novice that picks it up instantly
Yeah.
feels like, wow, yeah, this is really, really nice when they have some other tool in their hand.
Yeah. It's just genuinely good and it's durable. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pitches on mine. Like I ice climb 50 to 75 days a year, a lot. And so the pair that I have now, they've been through almost 2 seasons of that. Like a lot of climbing.
Yeah.
And they're, you know, I'm going through picks. I go through 6, 7, 8 picks a year, but the tools themselves are still doing great, which is, you're going to be happy to hear that. And I'm not kind to my gear, you know. I'm not. I beat on it.
Yeah, you probably take the bashing it into the curb even to another level, I would imagine. So
Yeah, I mean, these tools, it is actually funny. I was really careful with them initially because I liked them. Once I got like the final version, like I'll admit that some of the tools I don't really love, the destruction testing's been a little more available.
nice.
Whereas these ones, I'm like, I got to treat these nice because I like them.
Yeah.
And then I'd call up DG or Jeremy, I'd be like, you got any more of those picks? And they'd be like, oh, we got 3 in the back. And then they'd show up and, you know, they eventually get too short to use anymore. And,
Yeah.
but yeah, anyhow, it's just been a cool thing to be involved with. And I think you in design and Q&A and back here at BD headquarters you've done something very, very cool. And I'm psyched to have been part of it.
I'm curious, Will, for you, what head weight do you usually climb in?
You know, in the Canadian Rockies, I run too heavy. And
You do? Okay.
Yeah, it's cold there, and you want to get a swing fast and get it in and keep moving. And my style is to get good sticks and move quick. But, I'll drop it down for urea. I'll run too light there because you don't need it. Or for dry tooling, the same thing, right? It's 5 and roughly 43. They varied quite a lot.
Yeah, it's 5 and 40.
5 and 40.
Yeah,
So
each.
Yeah, so you can run them on opposite sides. You can run a 40 on one side and a 5 on the other if you want like a mid-weight. And that customization is really useful. I like that a lot. And then the other thing is not having it on the pick. And I went back and forth in this. I actually have picks that are drilled out for pick weights to try that out, and they don't get stuck in the ice.
Yeah.
It's really nice when you're climbing like the chandelier of death, not to get that head weight stuck in there when you're hooking in deep. I could talk about this shit forever because I really care about it. But there's just other little things. Like on the final ice pick, there's no teeth up here. And this was like a heated subject in emails for a long time.
That was a late change.
Yeah,
That was sales samples.
I'm probably responsible personally for well, you say it's other people, thank you, but I would like to think probably I've done $100,000 worth of damage here. But
That might be about right.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm not getting a raise. Anyhow, moving right along. But there used to be teeth up here, and they would get stuck when you're climbing in deep pockets or in really complicated terrain. You go to rip it out, and the teeth would engage, and it wouldn't come out. And people want to be able to. I looked at the email the other day. I was kind of a jerk on a couple of those emails, man. Sorry, but I was like, if you're misusing your ice tools by putting the head on the ground, like who would do that? That's obviously people do. You probably did that on Jano. You
I
probably
would say I do quite a bit. Jeez.
Why would you That's what this end is for, though.
Yeah.
Anyhow, all this stuff. This is designed to climb ice really, really well with the ice picks on it, and it does. And I can give them to anybody, and I'm proud of it. I'm a small part in it, but I'm proud of that part. And I'm like, try these out. And I know they're going to like them. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
If they don't like them, they don't know how to climb ice. So we're done.
That's it. Just not we're done with the conversation.
No, there is still room for personal preference, even though these are the best.
Yeah. All right, Jackson. So you've had these tools to some pretty special places. Talk to me about kind of like, how does the Hydra hit home for you?
I started climbing on them, like I said, in 21 when sort of some of the first protos came out, and I was hooked on them instantly. I've been climbing on the fuel prior to that, and I'd gotten up a lot of stuff with the fuels, but I was just excited to have a tool that made climbing some of these bigger routes that much more efficient. Took them up, the Moonflower Buttress on Hunter in a 20-hour push, and then I took them up the Infinite Spur on Foraker and 24-hour push, and then the Slovak, and then Janu, and then a bunch of stuff in the Revelation Mountains, plus thousands or hundreds of pitches in between those and all those winter seasons. And I'm a solid believer.
Yeah, if you look at just the pictures on Janu and some of those really technical pitches, this tool had to have been kind of a really nice thing to have in your back pocket.
Oh, for sure. And like Will, I climbed on the Cobra quite a bit in my first season on Jano. I took that up there, but it just wasn't wasn't quite cutting it for the technical climbing. But I didn't want to take the fuel up there because we do climb a lot of ice. So I was pretty fortunate to have this last season with me.
Nice.
Yeah. Thanks to Sean here.
Historically though, you're supposed to take a pick like this, and you're supposed to take a tool like this out there. But you're going for it with the Hydras and the biggest of the big and the gnarliest of the gnar.
If I had those, I probably wouldn't leave the ground.
This is the standard, man. I do think that's awesome though. That you're taking the same tool that I've used for hyper technical stuff into these big, and then doing hyper technical stuff there too. That's pretty cool.
I think I want a video of we go out with Will and see him climb M7, M8 with that tool. That'd be kind of fun. Well, that'd be some good video.
Is the other tool is the mountain tool released yet?
Next year.
Okay, we can't talk about that, but there's a replacement for this.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's different than this. This has this weird thing on the back that we used to use in this 1940s for chopping steps and shit.
And giving yourself stitches.
Yeah, giving yourself stitches.
Black
It's
eyes.
this thing is, this is actually useful for T-slots and things, and you can put sort of an ads on the new mountain tool coming out. Is there a Hydra as?
Yeah,
Still?
it's the same one. You can put that on there too.
Yep.
Yeah, if you really have to build T-slots, then you can still do it. How many T-slots did you build on Janu?
0.
Right on. So moving right along, that settles that equation. Technical tools aren't just for waterfalls,
No,
man.
not anymore.
Not when the waterfalls are at 7,000 meters.
Hey,
Yeah,
get it on.
yeah.
It's pretty cool.
So for you on John Who, what weight did you have in the heads?
I ran one heavy, one light.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like
What
that
do you
midweight.
What do you like, Aaron?
I've gone back and forth. I think it kind of depends on the conditions, but more I'm medium more than anything. Medium and light. Heavy feels a little too heavy for me. Yeah, but I
Okay.
really like the light.
I'm excited to try out the two heavies in Canada this winter on some of that brittle ice. See how it digs.
Things get cold up there here.
Sure does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
At least
function.
That's what I hear.
It does get cold. We have some new things for you guys to play on.
That sounds like an invite, I think, Jackson.
Yeah, come on up.
Yeah, party at
We're
Will's.
going.
Yeah.
You bring your sled.
Although keeping up with Will, there's not going to be any partying at night. It's going to be party during the day. So,
no.
so what was the theory? I'm kind of curious between on Janu to have one heavy, one light.
Well, there's so much ice that we're climbing up there that I did like the efficiency of having a little extra weight on the head of the tool, just because we're swinging a lot up on that head wall. There's these massive sheets of ice that are like football field sized.
Yeah.
So when we're climbing through that, the extra weight was nice, but then when I'm rock climbing, it's a little nicer not to have so much weight on there.
Yeah. Okay. And then if you're out waterfall ice climbing, kind of depends on where you're at. What weight?
Yeah, it depends on where I'm at. I'd probably run a similar thing back home too, but I've also run the two lights ice climbing in Utah just because it's so warm.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just about warmth either. Like it's also about has it been climbed before or not.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you've got minus 30 ice, it's been climbed like dozens of times, and you can just hook your way up, but it's so pleasant. And,
Yeah.
and
You mean
nice.
like Water Ice 5 in Uray and Water Ice 5 in Canada are different?
Well, and if it's been climbed a lot, it's not that different.
That's true.
you know?
There's some places in Canada that get some traffic.
Yeah, it's actually really rare on trade routes to find that much new ice. It's things just get climbed more. So
Yeah, that's true. Well, I know for me, it's the first time I felt like I can I finally have like a tool that I can really believe in for everything, and that's pretty cool. I mean, I know I've always been able to kind of make tools work for me, and I think all of us are able to make tools work for ourselves. But I really go back to what you said of like being at these I was really excited about it. That first swing, I'm like, oh my god! And then when you go to clinics and people pick it up and they're like, oh my god, and they're trying to walk away with your tool, you're like, oh yeah, all right, we've hit this one. Like finally, we've got the tool we've all been wanting, and I think that's pretty cool. And I did think it initially, like the changing the head weights was kind of finicky. I was like, it's just really. And then I think it was a conversation you and I had, and you were talking about the heavies. I think it was at maybe Uri or somewhere, and I was like, really? I was like, I don't. And I changed them out and went out, and I was like, oh, okay, no, this actually makes a pretty considerable difference in the swing and how this tool performs, especially in those cold conditions and things like that. And so now I think depending on what the day's like, it's kind of what head weight I put on, which I think is kind of cool. I mean, it feels a little finicky, but when you feel it, you understand it for sure.
Yeah, and I'd like to add too that it's like pretty cool with the head weight modularity, how you can adjust for the hammer on the back.
Oh,
with
yeah.
the blank hammer,
Yep.
or with the big hammer, the adds, and all the different components that you can put on these tools on the heads. You can adjust with those head weights to regain that balance.
Yep, absolutely. Well, guys, it's been a super good conversation. Anybody else? Will, you got any? I mean, I know we could talk ice tools for everybody for a long time here, but we're gonna get on another podcast together anyway. So, but anything else for you, Will?
No, just really, it's been a neat project to be part of. It's neat to go from like these sketches and things that look like that through it all with everybody and getting the other athletes' feedback. And I think, I've done some things in the outdoor industry, but I'm really happy to have been just by how long I've been involved with it. But it's just cool to be part of this. And I hope other people have as much fun with them as we did. And I think that's important to note too, like ice climbing's been fun and engaging for a very long time. We have better tools now, but it's still the same spirit, man. You go out with your friends and you do kind of stupid stuff together, and it's a lot of fun. So I think that's the main thing,
Yeah, I just glad we don't have leashes anymore. I'm really excited about that.
I liked my leashes, man. No, leashes are done. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot gaiters, leashes. There's a lot of stuff that should be rear-view mirrored, and that's good.
100% on that one. Yeah, I it's cool because this is, 5 years in the making from putting things on paper.
We're just
a little
about getting close.
Pretty cool. So I hope everybody enjoys as well. I mean, this is 5 years in the making, a lot of testing, a lot of arguments with Will, some friendships that didn't talk to each other for a little while. But you know what? We have what we have, and I think everybody's pretty stoked on it. Anything else for you, Jackson?
Oh, just stoked to see him in everyone's hands this winter.
Yeah. And Sean, anything for you, man?
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're all pretty excited. And Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm just psyched. You guys are psyched.
Oh, yeah. We're psyched. And, yeah, I mean, Hydra is going to be available at all that, for the most part, most ice festivals out there. So we're going to have a nice, large demo fleet. And they're going to be available here very soon to purchase. So highly recommend people getting their hands on them. So thanks for giving me some time here, guys. And psyched for everybody to get the winter kicked off.